unofficial Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello and welcome to Villanova Tip Time, the Villanova men's basketball pregame show. I'm your host, Chris Notaro. We are here, as always, this season presented by Homefield Apparel as part of the Nova Insider Network. Promo code Nova Insider, you know the drill. And we're here on this beautiful Sunday evening with Villanova welcoming in Providence to the Wells Fargo Center at the top of the hour. You'll find that game over on Fox Sports 1. We'll talk a little bit about the week that was, and the slide continued. We'll introduce this Providence team, and we'll get you on your merry way for tip-off at the top of the hour. Really, excited, I think, for the game at hand in the standalone Sunday slot. I got to start with that. I tweeted about this a little while ago. An otherwise slow sports Sunday, obviously no football as we're in the off week before the Super Bowl. Yes, there were the Pro Bowl games, but it's not exactly football, at least as we come to experience it on our Sundays, week in and week out through the fall and winter. A couple NBA games on. Actually, I would say a good slate of NBA games, but the only national game on, which is going to go head-to-head with this Nova game, isn't necessarily anything overly special. You have the hockey all-star game this weekend. Again, just a slower than average sports Sunday as far as fall and winter goes. And of course, you're going to have the second half of this game overlapping with the Grammys. For those of you that are fans of Curb Your Enthusiasm, we'll be getting that back later tonight as well. But either way, this slot that we find the Cats in is fun. It's a fair weather day in the area, so a great opportunity for those of you in the Philly area. Hopefully not watching this because you should be at the Wells Fargo Center, but a great February tailgating opportunity. The weather's not miserable, so take the opportunity to be out there. And I'm hoping that we can kind of ride the good vibes of what this time shot should be into a win that should get this team off the snide, off the 5-game losing streak, because the week so far really has to start there with the loss to Marquette, number 9th ranked Marquette, who came into the Fin earlier this week. What's the headline from that game? Anybody that's watching this already knows. We went down big earlier in that game to the tune of down 20. We roared back, fought back pretty hard to take a lead somewhere between the 12 and 15-minute mark of the second half. And I remember saying, wow, I can't believe we're in the lead, just with how far behind we were even just a few game minutes prior, but saw that there was a lot of time left. And again, the team let Marquette pull away in the fourth quarter of the game, ultimately losing the game 85-80, cementing a 5-game losing streak, which this fan base is certainly not accustomed to. And now a team that 2 weeks ago was statistically listed at 90+% to make the NCAA tournament is a far cry from that, probably less than 50%. As I've been saying all along, I think this team is going to need about 20 wins to make it to the dance. They only have 10 games left and they're sitting at 11 wins. And so that's starting to become a math problem for this team, even though they definitely have the resume to get there over a lot of teams, assuming they can notch a couple more quality wins here. I think they're going to have trouble in the total wins column. They're going to need wins at the Big East tournament. And you just hope they really don't have any margin for error, because if they lose, they've got, like I said, 10 games left. A lot of those games are winnable games, but you still have to play at UConn. You still have your rematch against Creighton. And you can't really afford to lose too many more games before you're going to be forced into a situation where you need to win the Big East tournament to get in, obviously, with the automatic bid there. But the numbers game starting to look scary for the Cats, and no number scarier than that number 5, which is the number of straight losses we're on right now. Really need to break that streak, as most I would say projections have Villanova in the first 4 out or the next 4 out kind of category. Nova's on the outside looking in and needs to get some stuff done. So, like I said, where does this week, what's the headline of the week? The loss to Marquette, the aftermath and the ramification on the bubble. But there's also a lot of weird discourse in the fan base later in the week. And I shouldn't say weird. I think a lot of the criticism is very warranted, especially to see this roster on paper with the talent that has the reported cost of the roster and Villanova bringing forth one of the top NIL programs. There are legitimate questions. This team should be better than this. But I think there's a lot of discourse that goes too far on both ends of the spectrum. And honestly, as just a fan, as an alum, as a donor, I find a lot of that noise just kind of annoying and embarrassing. I think 80% of fans are, and probably most of the people who, tune into this show with any regularity, I think 80% are probably pretty normal. Yes, upset about the state of the team. You have your questions, I think, depending on folks falling all over the spectrum on how they feel about the coaching staff at the moment, with legitimate questions, but also legitimate reasons to support. But it's the 10% outliers on both sides. It's the sort of the ignorant deniers that there's potentially some smoke here and a problem. Obnoxious. That's obnoxious behavior at this point. But also the 10%, and some of the reported behavior coming out of campus this week, just embarrassing. Just genuinely embarrassing. You see the comment of, quote unquote, don't tell people how to fan. I totally believe that. But I think it's okay as a fellow fan to point out behavior that's just like, hey, that's not cool, and that's a bad look. And I look no further than the soundbite that Tyler Kolek gave the day after the game, where he said, hey, they booed their coach. We knew we won that game before the game even started. So while I think it's totally fair for fans to be figuring out how to show their questions, their criticisms, and look for more legitimate dialogue and communication coming from the program, especially if you're a student, an alum, or a donor. But it's another to be putting your team in position to give the opponents an advantage, which I think we are at risk of doing with some of the behavior going on. So, like I said, I think most of you fall in the middle of that spectrum and kind of see what I'm saying about the extremes on both sides. But at the end of the day, if we want this team to make the NCAA tournament, the attitude and the momentum needs to turn around, and I think fans are going to play a part in that, whether we like it or not. Oh, all right. What else do we got to talk about here before we get into tonight's game? Well, also we got to talk about the retirement announcement. Of course, my friend Chris Bellotti over at Full 40 announcing that he was going to be stepping aside as a full-time member of their podcast after this year, leaving the Full 40 in the capable hands of Willie and Trevor. Really appreciate the friendships that I developed with all these guys, but Chris and I go way back. A lot of people may or may not know this, but we were actually roommates once upon a time, like forever ago, 15, 20 years ago, when we studied abroad. We spent a summer together in London. So we've been friends for a long time. This thing has definitely, reconnected that friendship. And also I have to say, I really appreciate, just sort of Chris and those guys looking out for me. When I was just getting this program started a few years ago, they had already sort of built their imprint and, sort of welcomed me with open arms into the community and to trying to do something, creating unique content, especially as I was not really trying to go the podcast route. Obviously, I'm going the live pregame show route, so it's a little bit different than a lot of the other content out there. But those guys were super supportive, and glad it was able to, sort of reconnect Chris and I as friends. Obviously, wish him well as his, he's taken the time to focus on his growing family. But what those guys have done at the Full 40 and sort of building just the level of, call it, microphone that they've built in the Villanova Twitter community, the Big East Twitter community at large, something really impressive, and cool to be part of this Nova Insider Network with them, and pumped to be working with Willie and Trevor going forward. So definitely wanted to touch on that as well, and hope again that this team can turn it around so that we've got an exciting last month or two of the season here. And not, this chaotic kind of melancholy that I think a lot of people are rightfully feeling with this team, having now lost 5 in a row. But let's talk about the road ahead before we get into Providence. After this Providence game, what does Nova have coming up? Well, they've got at Xavier on Wednesday. They've got Seton Hall on Super Bowl Sunday. They've got at Georgetown and a home rematch against Butler the week after that. They might need to win all 5 of these games, including Providence and those 4 I just rattled off. In those 4 I rattled off after Providence, you probably need to go at least 3-1. Again, this is a numbers problem for this team. They have the resume wins to get themselves into the tournament, but they've also got a lot of losses and bad losses at that. And so it's a numbers game. You have to stack wins. With only 10 games left, there's almost no margin for error. So I think while it's totally appropriate that the fans and all the talking heads are looking ahead to see where those wins come in, this is time for the team to practice what they preach, and that the most important game has to be the next one, because almost every game will be a must-win from here on out. There's just no breathing room left. So insert a Providence team today into the Wells Fargo Center who, albeit very different road to get there, but in a similar situation, finding themselves right around Villanova on the bubble. Again, depending on what bracketologist you subscribe to, you'll see this Providence team in the last four in. I saw one of the Villanova writers, Jeff Nyberg, earlier today, they have them in the Dayton category of the tournament field, right, in those 11 seed play-in games. So Providence, just as hungry coming in, just as much in need of stacking wins to make sure they keep themselves on the right side of the bubble and potentially improve their seeding position if they can get hot over this last month of the season, plus the Big East tournament. Kim English in his first year at the Providence helm, I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole of talking about the coaching situation in Providence. We all know Ed Cooley left under interesting circumstances. Shout out to Divine Providence for all the hullabaloo last week in Big East Twitter. Pretty cool documentary that I would say worth checking out if you're a fan of Big East basketball. But Ed Cooley moves on. Enter Kim English, sort of a hot up-and-coming, mid-major head coaching experience, but a first-year head coach at Providence. And has this team coming into this game at 14-7 overall, 5-5 in the Big East. And, the big story around this team, I would say there's two. The first one, I'm going to start with Bryce Hopkins because he's the player that's no longer there anymore because of injury. Providence was looking like a wagon when they had the 1-2 punch of Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter. But Bryce Hopkins, unfortunately, goes down with injury for the rest of the season. And poof, I thought their tournament hopes kind of went with them. I think it's impressive what Kim English has done in the first year there. But when you lost a player of Bryce Hopkins' importance to that team, I thought that they were, pretty much toast. While I will say I think their ultimate ceiling is still capped. Are they a legitimate title contender? No. But they're absolutely a contender for a spot in the tournament. And they play when they play well, they play connected basketball, and they're a fun team to watch. So this is by no means a pushover game for Villanova with Kim English bringing this team in. I do have to put a pin in giving Providence its flowers for overcoming a difficult situation with the Cooley stuff and playing fun ball. I got to put a pin in that for a second because I do think it's utterly ridiculous that their team slogan is mindset, coming into a conference that's been owned by Villanova with a mantra of attitude. I've jokingly said a number of times this would be like me moving to Oregon to start a shoe company, moving it in next to Nike and making my slogan "Just Does It." They're just preposterous, and I can't believe how hard they're leaning into that. But I'm gonna before I work myself into a tizzy, we're gonna just put that aside, and we're gonna talk again about this Providence team coming in because, like I said, they're not a pushover. They're not an easy way to get off this losing streak, and the Cats are gonna have to bring it if they want to notch this win today at the Wells Fargo Center. Why is that? We'll start with Devin Carter, total stud, averaging 18 points, 8 boards, 3.5 assists a game, playing like a conference player of the year candidate, playing his way into NBA level comps and talk from a guy who's just taken a huge leap, was a good player, now playing at an elite level so far this season. And he'll be a focal point for the Villanova defense if Villanova is going to notch this victory. Also want to shout out forward Josh Odoro. He's averaging 15 points and almost 7 boards a game himself. There are a lot of rotation players and contributors who can get hot on a given night, but after Carter and Odoro, you're slim pickings if you look at the average stat sheet and the average points per game. And so you're going to see the Villanova defense keying in on both of those players, probably extraordinarily over the rest of the team. I think when you see the Villanova defense key in on 1 or 2 guys like this, I think you're worried about getting a little sloppy or loose on the perimeter and giving up threes. Good thing to note that this Providence team is not necessarily a strong three-point shooting team. They shoot statistically on average way fewer threes than Nova, and they shoot around the same percentage, which obviously we know Nova's three-point shooting percentage down this year, down in the low to mid 30s of percentage-wise. So I think this is a game that if the Cats can go out and execute, they can go out and bring the energy. They absolutely can and should win this game, I believe, especially without Bryce Hopkins. The Villanova Wildcats are the much more talented team on paper. But as far as young Big East head coaches go, the momentum for Kim English is certainly much stronger than the momentum for Coach Neptune at this point in time. So it serves as a big opportunity for the players and the coaching staff. Whew. 2 minutes left till game time. I think let's round it out with a couple of keys to the game here. Just kind of recapping everything I've been ranting and raving about for the last 15 minutes. I think number one, haven't actually mentioned this yet. Key to the game. Hello, Captain Obvious. We have to break the slow starts. I think one thing that can be a little frustrating is when you look at the sound bites coming out of the team and media availability, they're pretty much saying the same things over and over. And that's all well and good when the team is winning. These are sort of more blips on the radar, but with the consistent slow starts being directly corollary to the losses, I think you want to see a little bit more from the team to break those slow starts. You want to see them throwing extra wrinkles, new wrinkles out there to maybe try things you haven't tried before. The other side of that fence is you don't want to see coach getting too crazy with the rotations, which has sometimes taken the team out of rhythm. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, but no matter what, a key to this game is for Villanova to avoid that slow start because it's been their doom lately. Number two, got to contain Carter. Number three, I think weathering the storm, weathering the emotional storm of all the noise around the team right now. A lot to be made this week of some conversations. Coach Jay Wright, being seen frequently having conversations with guys after practice, pulling Justin Moore aside, pulling Eric Dixon aside. Justin Moore quoted within the last couple of days. I believe this was a Colin Beasley interview, just talking about how the conversation is pretty consistent with all the prior conversations about staying together and keeping the attitude and keeping the leadership. And we really need to see that on display if this team is going to turn it around. Lastly, before we finish, I want to say you got to ride your hot hands. We want to stay aggressive through Eric Dixon as primary option 1A. TJ Bamba has been playing some great ball for us. Mark Armstrong has been playing some more confident ball for us and packing the stat sheet. So you want to ride these hot hands with a balanced attack that attacks the rack. I think if we can do even some of these things, we're going to see good things against Providence here. But right now, we're bringing us right down to the top of the hour. So we'll see you Wednesday before Villanova's rematch against Xavier. This time that game's going to be at Cintas Center, which is always a tough place to play. Hoping that we're coming in there with a win under our belt against Providence tonight. But for now, grab your favorite Sunday beverage and your favorite spot on the couch. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.